So question 1 from the audience here, this one's for Kelly. Has there been any research or theories that look at an evolutionary reason for the dramatic drop in hormones in women, i.e. is there any evolutionary advantage? Do hunter-gatherer societies experience menopause similarly to Western populations, or could lifestyle factors explain differences across cultures?
Wow. Yes. Okay, so that's a long enough question for a podcast episode. and in respect of time, I will try to be brief. Globally, we're living longer than we ever have as a society. In the Victorian era, women stopped having babies in their early to mid-50s and were dead by 57 on average. If you look at the richest people that we actually had death records for in what is now England, those were the aristocratic men, right? Because we didn't really write down anybody else because we didn't have a lot of paper. The average age of death was 47. If you look at animals that are kept in captivity, we have the longest living seal in Portland, Oregon right now at like 50 some years. They usually live 18 years in the wild. Orangutans live now kept in captivity, are living longer than ever before and are going through menopause. Evolutionary from yeast to us, there seems to be an evolutionary advantage to animals living a little bit longer than their reproductive lifestyle for the women. And so it's not, the big myth you hear is only humans and 4 whales. No, most animals, when kept in safe environments without predators and good health care, will outlive their ovarian lifespan. So I often hear this question as like, it's natural to menopause is like a choice by, evolution so that we can take, it's like, average age you can get pregnant is seriously, if we don't want to think about it, but 16, which means you're a grandmother, double that by 30, which means you're a grandmother, double that by 45. So the grandmother hypothesis as a reason to not treat menopause and menopause symptoms is simply made up. So I hope that's clear. It's a complicated question, but by and large, I see that question asked a lot as a justification for not treating women with hormones. Living 40 years past ovarian function as a global group of humans has never happened before. We have clean water, sanitation, and antibiotics. Antibiotics alone increased our life expectancy by 26 years. So to say we should not treat this because this is how it's meant to be is simply not true.
Fantastic, thank you. This question, I think, is for Dr. Wright. Will hormones help with osteoporosis?
So remember the osteoblast that's trying desperately to build bone, which gets a lot of help from the muscle you're going to build, that gets a lot of help by the controlling our adipose that we're all trying to do? Well, that cannot keep up with run wild osteoclasts, which break down our bone. So if we want to re-regulate our bone, estrogen is critical. So get this. If you decide to do estradiol therapy or estradiol replacement, I don't want to call it therapy, it's not, we're just replacing what our bodies make. Replacement, you'll control this imbalance. And then if you decide to go off of it for whatever reason, you will then re-trigger the imbalance and lose bone density. And so a few years doesn't mean forever, but the longer you have better bones, the better.
I think the other big myth is that bones are static. Like, you have osteoporosis, it is what it is. So don't take hormones or whatever. But it's like, well, what about all the other bones that aren't yet osteoporotic in your body? If you get your DEXA and you have one bone that's osteoporotic.
You can correct your bone density. We know that in 6 months with all the things, which includes estradiol, sometimes testosterone, jumping, I'm not kidding, actually, jumping, lifting heavy, proper nutrition, including high protein diets, you can stabilize or build bone as proven by DEXA scan in as little as 6 months. You can regain about 3%. So it's not hopeless, but it can be if we just let our bones be reabsorbed.
Thank you. Next question. I'm on hormones, never felt better. Can my 77-year-old mother who has genitourinary symptoms of menopause, no uterus, use estrogel and testosterone. Can she take Prometrium for sleep? Thank you. Marsha.
Yeah, so vaginal estrogen is a no-brainer. Started in a 101-year-old person that you know. Because remember, it's just skincare. Anybody can start it. The big myth with estrogen was, and again, it's an episode for a podcast, but to keep it quick, the big myth was that starting it later caused significant damage and we shouldn't do it. Turns out that was in oral formulations that we rarely use anymore, and the damage that it caused was actually quite minimal. So a great paper came out in 2024 saying we really need to reconsider this rule that you're too late to start. And now that's with estrogen. And testosterone has no rule of when to start, and progesterone has no rule of when to start. So when people tell me, I was told I can't start hormones, I'm like, did you ask about vaginal estrogen, transdermal estradiol, progesterone, and testosterone? Because even the one of those four that has the rule is being reconsidered by the experts.
Great. Okay, Shauna, I think this one's for you. If I have had estrogen positive breast cancer 20 years ago, am I able to use HRT?
Okay, so this is definitely a nuanced answer. I think the first thing I want to say is that the estrogen positive breast cancer thing has got a little bit confused in people's minds. So a lot of people will tell me that their mum had breast cancer and their doctor told them that it was their hormone replacement therapy that caused it. And that's not what an estrogen positive breast cancer actually means. So we just go back to a cell. When a cell is normal, as I talked to you about, it's got all these little garages that different receptors for different things to attach to. And as a cell becomes cancerous, to be honest, it looks less like a normal cell, less and less and less and less like it. And so if you get to the point where you have a cell that is estrogen receptor negative and it's a breast cancer, that means that all the estrogen receptors in simple terms have dropped off the cell. Whereas if you have an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, it means that there are still some of those receptors on the cell, and therefore you can use those receptors to manipulate the cell. And so it does definitely get confused in people's mind that somehow it means that estrogen caused their breast cancer, and that's not what it means. But I think the flip side of that is that you can definitely then manipulate the breast cancer with hormones or with hormone blockers. This is a very long answer to a complicated question. I think it's definitely not a no. I've definitely got patients who have had breast cancer and have made the choice to take hormones because their quality of life was so poor. They made that decision. But that's usually something that I do in consultation with their oncologist, and we have a conversation. And for anyone who does have breast cancer or who's concerned about that, I do really recommend this book called Estrogen Matters by Avram Blooming. And it really explains how estrogen and hormone replacement therapy, or how breast cancer and hormone replacement therapy ended up linked together, and how we probably have a lot of wrong assumptions and we've come to really wrong conclusions. So if anyone's trying to navigate the decision, I do think that this book is really helpful. Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
I would agree with all of that completely, and I would add vaginal estrogen, so the local pelvic estrogen. We have decades and decades of studies, over 500 studies on over 25,000 breast cancer survivors, that women who choose to use vaginal estrogen have no increased risk of mortality with breast cancer and no increased risk of recurrence of breast cancer. It's incredibly safe. Incredibly safe. ACOG, which is the American Obstetrics and Gynecology College, does have an online statement that says it is safe in breast cancer survivors. I tell my patients, print that out. If anybody tells you that, otherwise, we do have very safe data. And marriages end because of untreated intimacy issues, the recurrent UTIs. My vulva hurts so bad I can't wear pants. These women are profoundly suffering. And we do have the facts and information that vaginal estrogen is very safe. And I hope that we move that up for our survivors so they get the treatment they deserve.
How old is too old to start hormone replacement? I don't know who wants to.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the previous conversation of when I think of hormone replacement therapy, like 4 main buckets: progesterone, testosterone, vaginal estrogen, systemic estrogen. Only one of those, systemic estrogen, had the stereotype that the stereotype or the myth is age 60 is too late. Where did that come from? Women's Health Initiative study, which is the big study, said, hey, there seems to be more risk in older women when they started hormones. Very different from, can I keep going with it if I'm on it and doing well? That's a resounding hell yes. But it's really like, hey, if we started a sick 74-year-old smoker with cardiovascular disease, she might have had higher risks on this medication. Now remember, those were synthetic hormones. They're not the hormones we use now. So we can't apply apples to oranges. And they just reanalyzed the data and said, these women actually didn't do that poorly in the first place. The baby boomers are pissed. They were 51 years old when the Women's Health Initiative came out. They've been withheld from hormones for 20 years. Now they're in their 70s. They've got osteopenia, osteoporosis, recurrent urinary tract infections. They still have brain fog and hot flashes, some of them. And we really are reconsidering the starting for the boomers. I have many healthy women in their young 70s, and we talk about it. And at the end of the day, this is your body, your choice. Know the risks and know that the risks are not that great.
Thank you. Another one for you, Kelly. I have tried vaginal estrogen, but it stings and I cannot use it. My vagina is so sensitive. I get cuts from any touch, vibrator, or any sex or creams. What else can I do? I'm taking estradiol topically on my body.
Yep. So sometimes the product that the cream comes in is what's irritating. So you can get it compounded in creams or gels that aren't so irritating. So that's an option for women. Sometimes the atrophy, it's so severe. I'm a proponent of like, start it when you're young so you don't get that severe in the first place. Why wait till you suffer, right? So it's like the skin's so unhealthy, like everything makes it angry. So we have to come up with something that makes that skin can heal a little bit. And then vaginal estrogen just off the shelf is probably fine. So I think about a compounded in a product that's less stingy. I think about the vaginal estrogen tabs. We have vaginal estrogen ring. I like DHEA a great deal. It's a suppository. So I'm looking for a way to treat the skin without that cream being irritated to it. So that's somebody that I'm going to see more frequently to be like, what are you tolerating? Are you healing? What can we add now? And again, that's somebody that I wish had hormones 10 years ago, so we didn't get to that place in the first place. I do believe that vaginal atrophy and GSM is completely preventable, but we have to rethink why wait for women to suffer so bad before starting hormones instead of preventing it in the first place. So options are available.
Thank you. This one is for Vonda. What is the risk of not going on HRT? i.e., if you can manage symptoms today, is there a future risk?
So I think that we stop thinking about HRT if we don't have hot flashes or night sweats. Maybe you don't have all the things that I described to you that I have. Maybe your body never hurt. But I think what we forget is the statement that there are estrogen receptors on every organ in your body, including your brain. Lisa Mosconi, a brilliant brain scientist in New York, recently showed last year that the brain lights up with the estrogen receptors, right? And she's now just gotten a $50 million grant to fully answer all the questions about estrogen receptors and Alzheimer's, right? So we can't stop at the simple bothersome, I'll gut through the hot flash thing, because here's what we know about hot flashes. The more severe your hot flashes are, they can affect your increased risk of cardiovascular disease. They're not a benign process that you just slug through because you're brave. It can affect your hearts. There is plenty of data, despite some of the debate that seems to be going on, that estrogen is critical for cardiovascular disease in women, especially in the first 10 years of the menopause. And I just made a big case for you about why estrogen is critical for your bones, your muscles, your tendons, ligaments, back. And so if we stop with the simple things, we might be tempted to say, oh, I'm just going to suffer through hot flashes because mine aren't that bad. But I think what that does is it leaves the rest of our organ systems vulnerable. It still remains your choice, but I want you to make that choice with the facts. And the fact is you're leaving every other organ system vulnerable.
I love that. I think a myth of like the menopause, like the educators out there are, the critics will be like, you just want everybody on hormones. And I'm like, frankly, I don't care what you do.
It's your body.
Like, I don't care what you do. I want women to have the education that we have, and then make an educated decision and not make a decision out of fear. My second thought is, if men had a drug, which can you even call hormones that your body naturally makes a drug? But if, let's say men had a drug that if they took it between age 50 and 60, and on average they lived 3 years longer than the men who didn't take that drug between age 50 and 60, do you think they'd all be on it? Most people say, yeah, the guy would probably take whatever that was. And I'm like, yeah, we have that data. It's called estrogen. So when women say, hey, I feel fine, or it's not that bad, or I can tolerate it, I see a culture that has taught women that suffering is normal. And I also see a culture in medicine that says, we'll treat you once you're sick enough, come back later. And really, longevity and hormones for women go hand in hand. But you have to change the culture of medicine to say, I care more about preventing your hip fracture, preventing your dementia, preventing your UTIs, and preventing all of that than saying, you're not sick enough yet. Come back later when you're sick. But it's a profound change in how we think in medicine.
So I'm going to give you 4 resources. If you're data people, if you're a woman that says, I need to read the data myself, if you're someone who likes a good summary, here are the 4 books. If you want my opinion on this, that will get you started on your midlife and menopause literacy. Number 1, read Estrogen Matters. It is the world's data on this relative safety and research on estrogen. You will know everything you need to know. It's easy. It's not an easy read, but it's certainly doable. Estrogen Matters, number 1. Number 2, if you want a good summary, it's like the old Encyclopedia Britannica written by your best girlfriend. Pick up The New Menopause by Dr. Haver. Get Dr. Casperson's book, You Are Not Broken, for the kind of conversation she just had about your sexual health. And then in November, get my book called Unbreakable, which lays out the complete longevity lifestyle that you need to make. That is the place to start, because it can be confusing. I mean, I had 22 years of formal medical education, and I'm the one that didn't know that my heart palpitations were perimenopause and not my heart, right? It can happen to anybody, and it happens to most doctors, because medical schools in no country spend any amount of time on midlife and menopause education. It's the fact.
On Sunday morning, when I was out walking at Terrigal Beach, which is a local beach, I kept crossing paths with a number of women who all had vests on, just like me, weighted vests. And we all gave each other a bit of a knowing look, because these have become very, very popular in peri and postmenopausal women. You might not know what rucking is, but basically what it is walking with either a weighted vest or a weighted rucksack. I personally opt for the weighted vest because I find it very, very comfortable and very, very quick to put on. So for peri and postmenopausal women, there are definitely a number of health benefits that you can gain from walking with extra weight. One of the health concerns that many women have at this stage of life is developing heart disease. And unfortunately, we know in the postmenopause, the rates of heart disease for women really start to accelerate. So why might rucking or walking with weight change that? Well, basically, whenever you're walking with additional weight, it increases your heart rate more, and it basically makes your heart exercise a little bit harder. So hopefully making your heart a lot more healthy. So that's one of the benefits of rucking in comparison to standard walking. So if you're intrigued and ready to start rucking, my recommendation would be that you start low and go slow. So start by choosing a weight that is 5 to 10% of your body weight at maximum, and take it slowly. Go for maybe a 10 to 20 minute walk at first. Don't decide to go on a 5-hour hike the first time you strap on your weighted vest. So we've been chatting to our friends at Rucksack, and I've got a special discount code for you. So if you go to their website, which is www.rucksack.com, so RUKSAK.com, and use the code Shauna15, so that's SHAUNA 15, you're going to get a 15% discount. So whether you decide to go for a vest or whether you decide to go for one of their backpacks, either way, you're going to get 15% off.
This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.